Hi, my name is Elise Embry, and today I'll be talking about an escalating issue regarding the homelessness rates in America. As someone who has known both family members and close friends who have encountered hardships such as this during their life, this issue is one that I hold close to my heart. According to the American Planning Association, a group aiming to create better communities for all through planning and reformation of policies, homelessness is defined as one who lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This more general description can be divided into two categories, transitional as well as chronic homelessness. Those who are transitionally homeless may not be the first people you think of when saying the word. People in the transitional period's primary need is housing. This includes those with entry-level jobs as well as those living month to month on their paychecks. One short-term emergency, such as a raise in rent or getting laid off, might quickly result in homelessness, as these people typically don't have the funds saved up to prevent such from happening. Those who are chronically homeless, however, typically have either health or substance issues and have been living in extreme poverty long-term. Many factors further the rise in homelessness. These contributors include increased housing prices, deindustrialization, and suburbanization of cities, which results in concentrating poverty, creating unsustainable communities, as well as the lack of affordable housing that limits the ability to move people out of shelters and into more permanent homes. Additionally, homelessness has many fiscal impacts on the economy. When in need, homeless people typically opt for the more expensive healthcare because it's also that of which is more convenient, such as emergency rooms and urgent cares. These hospitalization visits are costly, and the patients aren't usually in the position to be able to pay them off. Referring to the rehab side of treatment, rehabilitation centers are great resources for homeless, as many face issues that are best treated in such places. And while this is a positive, treating people without stable housing is costly again, and more than not ineffective, as many people tend to fall back into their addictions. Another concern regarding the fiscal impact is that many people who are on the streets will commit petty crimes in order to be jailed so that they have food and a roof over their head. This often compromises the individual's employability as they create or extend their records while creating a long-term reliance on the government welfare. Luckily, the government is in a unique position right now to make strides alleviating similar concerns with the recently implemented Build Back Better app. Biden's new plan gives hundreds of billions of dollars to infrastructure, healthcare, tax credits, and many other areas. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget provides a chart with more exact estimates of each category's aid on their website, if anyone's curious. And while these are all beneficial improvements, the plan doesn't allocate money specifically towards homelessness. Being passed only in August of 2021, this act is in the early enough stages to adjust its budgeting. The goal of the change is to address the affordable housing issues and homelessness by specifying a budget with the homeless in mind, as well as advocating for more means to prevent homelessness rather than simply treating the existing issue. According to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, the overall homeless population raised from 567,000 to 580,000 in the past year, 2/3 of which remain unsheltered. Congressmen and women have the power to make a change in this act. By simply allotting a portion of this act's allowance to be streamlined towards homelessness treatment and prevention, the federal government gives each state more power to fight against homelessness. With more local power, planners can disperse more diverse treatment centers throughout their cities, concentrating them where they need to be. Without adequate supply of housing, communities won't be able to effectively address homelessness, and these shelters would help that. These shelters should include housing for short-term emergencies, as well as programs to assist individuals in their search for employment, as well as permanent housing. Homelessness varies in both condition and intensity between states, and with a set allowance given to each state, representatives will be able to better address the issues specific to their region. The Vice President of Housing Policy for the Center of Budget and Policy Priorities advocates for the expansion of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, claiming that a substantial 10-year investment would end homelessness altogether. This program is another aid which would benefit from further financial assistance as the money helps to pay the rent of those in dire situations, targeted towards those who make below 15% of the region's median income. With so many options for aid, there's no reason for so many individuals to die to exposure, yet it's happening constantly across the nation. It's crucial to take advantage of the recent passing of the Build Back Better Act while it's still new enough to be seriously considered. Imagine yourself or a loved one going through even just one day of what a multitude of people face sometimes for their entire lives. Individuals aren't the only people in need of help, as many families face similar hardships while on the streets. No one deserves to face such intense feelings of uncertainty or to question where their next meal is coming from. Despite the final verdict of the act being in the hands of the government, you can start with advocating for those around you. Call your state representatives promoting this plan of action, petition for more inclusive funding for the homeless, and with enough calls, we will be sure to make a difference. It would break my heart to see someone I care for end up on the streets again, and I would hate for anyone else to have to endure such excruciating endeavors. Do your part, spread the word, and help in the ways you can. Thanks for listening. Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question. So with the rise of homelessness, I've noticed many urban cities put in funding to incorporate things like spikes on benches or just in other areas that homeless people would be able to sleep. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think we should put that funding towards a more positive thing that would benefit more homeless people?
I definitely think the funding should go towards something more beneficial to homeless people, because they're trying to prevent an issue that's already so prevalent that their prevention isn't really doing anything. It's just kind of making it more difficult and making them suffer more instead of giving them like more comfortable place. So I definitely agree. And I think that that funding would be better put to use towards like more shelters or more affordable housing.
So wherever you're from, is there like a high rate of like homeless people there?
I'm originally from Baltimore, so there's a pretty high rate of homeless people. Like anywhere I go, I'll definitely see one on the corner. And I like to try to help them out in the ways I can, but that only does so much.
So I remember a fact from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration that said about somewhere between, I think like 25% of all sheltered homeless people have been diagnosed or have a severe mental health issue. So how important do you think it is addressing mental health in conjunction with the homeless problem?
I think it's really important. And I think that if there were more shelters and like especially more variety of shelters available to homeless people to go to, I think that they would be able to find like each of the resources that they need, and that the shelters would be able to like push them in the right direction or like push them towards whatever shelter they needed to get to or whatever center.
I was
So,
actually, oh, sorry. You can go.
what I was going to say was, do you think that once these resources are, do you think that they should also be provided with some type of support to get back into a normal life to sustain themselves and help support themselves normally again instead of having to possibly revert back to that way of life?
Yeah, I think that if like these shelters were more like available, a lot of the ones that already are around have programs that they'll help, like they'll give. I used to volunteer at one back home called My Brother's Keeper, and it was like a soup kitchen. They would come in and just get a free meal if they needed one. And then they also had a center where they could work on their resume, and people would help them with that, and they could help them find jobs that are hiring that they would be qualified for, and help them find like housing that's more permanent. So I think that more shelters would be able to do a better job at like covering everyone, but there definitely are some resources out there.
my question is basically piggybacking off of that. So with like, I know there's a lot of older, like it's usually the older population with like resumes and everything, but I know there's probably like 18-year-olds that are out there as well. Do you think there should be like places that will like help push them back, going get like schooling and going through college or going to get through your GED or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, especially in like the job application portion of like homelessness, I guess.
Yeah.
Because like obviously more educated, you're more likely to get a job just because that's how life works. But yeah, I think that for like the young, especially if there were teen centers or like centers targeted towards younger audiences for homeless people, I think that would definitely be a good thing to have.
So like a lot of shelters have a time frame of how long you can stay. So what do you think is like the best amount of time that a person should have? Because obviously like if you have 3 days, you're not gonna, accomplish all these things in 3 days. So what do you think is like a good time frame to really help someone get back up on their feet?
That is a very difficult question because I feel like everyone's circumstances are so different. So obviously everyone needs a different amount of time to get back on their feet. But I think generally if shelters at least like a month or two, at least a month, I'd say, to like really help people get back on their feet, because even getting into the mindset of like out of like that mindset that they're in when they're homeless, when they are like struggling so much, can be really difficult and takes the time. And especially if they have other issues on top of that to deal with and work through, I think a month would be a good bare minimum.
Are there any other questions? All right, I think you're good to stop.